moment to go ahead and introduce some of our elected officials that we have, and we're going to allow them a minute to just say a couple of words. First, we would like to introduce Mr. Delegate Hope from Arlington County, and he just has a few words to say.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Hope. I represent Arlington County in the Virginia General Assembly. I also represent part of the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, which is the orange line, which for Arlingtonians that has been very successful for our economic stimulus and really a shot in the arm for our economically. And that's my vision, what I see for Route 1 corridor. So I really wanted to come today to express those views. It really could be a shot in the arm for us, for our schools. We can invest more in our schools. It certainly protects our environment by moving more people through transit, but also it would really help us economically and lower pollution as well. So I just wanted to leave that with you all, because I think, and I'm also running for Congress to represent this area in the 8th District, but I did want to also say to you, that should be a priority. And so whatever comes out of this study, that should be a priority at the federal level to make that investment in this part of Fairfax County and Mount Vernon. So again, thank you all for letting me be here to say a few words, and I'll turn it over to you, Amy.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Delegate Scott Servell.
Great, thanks, Amy. And I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's always great to see so many people down here in this part of the county at a public hearing to express their views. This study, what you're about to see tonight, is all about the future of our community. This is about what our community will look like when I am 62 years old, and when my children are getting ready to settle down, get married, and have children. It's about a vision through 2035. And to me, it's very exciting. I mean, when you see these options, we're talking about potentially extending the metro to Hannibal Valley, putting in bus rapid transit, or potentially light rail. This is the kind of investment we need to completely remake our community. And as you can see, it's not just about transit, it's also about land use, it's about density, it's about town centers, it's about high rises. These are things that we need your feedback and input on before we make final decisions, because it's all linked together. And the last thing I'll just say really quick is this study is made possible through a lot of hard work by Senator Toddy Pollard, who can't be here tonight. She broke her arm the other day, but she's doing good. She was at a public hearing we had this last weekend, but I talked to her today, and her arm was hurting her. But this study was a $2 million budget earmark secured by Senator Pollard. It was a budget amendment I put in as well. We also have another budget amendment that's pending in the budget we're fighting about right now for another $4 million to pay for the preliminary engineering and federal grant application and environmental studies to further this work over the next 2 years. And so Toddy and I are working really hard on that. So Senator Eben, Senator Hope will be helpful. Patrick Hope will be helpful. Delegate Hope will be helpful on that, as well as many others in Northern Virginia. But I'm really hopeful we'll get that done and get this project moving, so we'll get some shovels in the ground in the next 10 years. So thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate you being here. I also appreciate the help of Supervisor Jerry Highland, who's been very helpful in this process. Supervisor McKay is here as well. He's got the other side of, you're standing in his district right now tonight. And it's going to be a team effort to pull this off. We're going to need our federal, we're going to need Fort Belvoir's help. We're going to need our congressmen, our senators' help at the federal level to fund this, whatever we do. And it's going to be a big team effort. But thanks for coming tonight. We look forward to your input.
Thank you, Delegate Servell. So Supervisor McKay, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Amy, and I want to thank all of you for coming out as well. I think the most important thing tonight is that for those of you who have been around long enough, like I've been, some of you have been on the highway a long time, we've done a lot of studies of Route 1. What we haven't done is a lot of work, and it's time to do something. It's time to actually build something and get something in the ground. And so, in doing that, I want to emphasize something that's really important when you look through this presentation, because the key here is we need reliable first-class transit on Route 1. The real question is what type of transit. And that's what we're trying to get some feedback on tonight, because as Scott said, we're looking at long-range planning, what's this going to look like when Scott and I are in our 60s, but equally important, what's it going to look like for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years? We're getting some great revitalization momentum on the highway that we don't want to kill. And so we also got to be careful, we keep our eye on the ball long term, but we also think about the consequences for those of us who maybe don't have 30 or 40 years to see progress on Route 1 that we don't want to kill in the process of moving forward. And so we need to be thinking short term, as in today, what makes sense, midterm as to how we build towards a better future, and long term what it might look like 30 or 40 or 50 years from now. And that's really important because we can write the greatest plan we want for 40 or 50 years from now. But a lot of us don't have that time. And we want to see Route 1 improved now. And so I just ask you to be conscious of that as we go through the process. There's some economic analysis that's done, there's some land use analysis that's done, and there's some trade-offs with each of these opportunities. If you do high, heavy rail in a corridor, you're talking about a lot of economic decisions that have to be made and a whole lot of density you're going to see in the presentation. There's some mid-range things that in my mind make great sense with sophisticated BRT, maybe some light rail options that maybe don't require that level of density and that type of economics. And then there's just enhancements of what we already have. And so there's a bunch of different tiers here, a bunch of choices. We're going to be better informed as to where we go moving forward based on your input tonight. And so I can't thank you all enough for taking the time, caring about this corridor that we love, coming out tonight and giving us your feedback. So thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor McKay. Supervisor Highland, would you like to say a few words? I can.
Well, I'm already past 62.
And you're not running for Congress either.
And I'm not running for Congress. And I'm not going to wait as long as Jeff and Scott can wait. It's time we kick the transit can down the road and do something for Route 1 to change. Route 1 is a marvelous place for business in terms of an opportunity, but I want us to find a way to do some form of rail down Route 1 because we absolutely need it, and I think people support it. Thank you.
Okay. Was he able to make it yet? Okay. I know he will be here. He is on his way. There are a few other folks I'd like to recognize from Fairfax County. Leonard Wolfenstein, Tom Burke, as well as, let's see, we have George Phillips from Prince William County. We also have Bud Siegel from VDOT. They have all been on our project team and have been working very closely with us, and we appreciate that. We also have Tim Roseboom, who is with DRPT, and he's our project manager. We also have some folks from WMATA. We have Allison Davis is here, and as well as Jim Maslenka from the city of Alexandria. We appreciate you all being here. And Tom Blazer from Prince William County. So we do appreciate all of your support in this project. And I will turn it over to our consultants here in just a few moments. First, we'll turn it over to Tim Roseboom, and then we'll go ahead with the presentation.
Great, thank you, Amy, and thank you, supervisors and delegates. It's always good to see this kind of turnout for a public meeting, especially on such a nice day. It feels like well, nice compared to how it's been anyway. 30 degrees feels really warm compared to 15. So just a couple introductory remarks by me, and then I'll turn it over to Jason Mumford, who's our AECOM project manager, and Meredith Judy, who's our roadside and Harwell project manager. So what are we talking about? What is a multimodal alternatives analysis? Well, an alternatives analysis is really a study to look at sort of all the options to solve a transportation problem. And it means a lot in the transit community when you're looking at different transit alternatives, but it really is designed to look at sort of all-encompassing solutions, including doing nothing. Doing nothing is always sort of your baseline. When we say multimodal, what we mean is every different mode of transit. So you see the icons down there for rail and bus, you see the pedestrian, the bicyclist, you see a car. So multimodal means we're looking at all of those modes. So what's our purpose of the study? Again, to improve the transportation conditions, to provide better transportation options in the Route 1 corridor. What are the needs? To provide attractive and competitive transit service, to provide a safe and accessible bike and pedestrian access. That's a real issue out in the Route 1 corridor right now. And then also to accommodate automobiles, to make sure that you're building, for the demand, for the future demand for automobiles, but that you're not overbuilding. And then finally to support, and this is, I think, where Arlington and some of the land use that we've talked about comes in, support and accommodate more robust land use development. So you're putting infrastructure in place to accommodate, you know, better development and more development. So these are goals for the project. Expand multimodal transit options is goal 1. Improve safety, increase accessibility, goal 2. Increase economic vitality and viability of the corridor, goal 3. And support community health and minimize environmental impacts. And before I turn it over to Jason, just let me make one real quick public service announcement that everyone should have gotten 2 surveys when they came in. We do want your input on these goals, so fill out a survey, turn it into us before you leave. Also, there's some boards in the back. You can vote your preference with a dot for which goals you think should be weighted higher than others. And obviously, there's a website as well that you will give you an opportunity to provide input. And also, lastly, you can just sort of speak your comments to anyone on the project team, anyone with a name badge like myself. So I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to Jason. He's going to take you through the road, the bike, pedestrian, and transit alternatives, and then Meredith will take you through the land use.
Good evening. I hope that those in the back can see the slides at least somewhat. I like this particular image because in sort of a nutshell, it encapsulates a lot of what we experience on the Route 1 corridor. You see there's traffic on a very important suburban, today, arterial highway. You see a transit stop, and you see a transit bus. You also see that the access by a pedestrian to that transit stop isn't the easiest thing. And so just in this one image, it evokes a pretty accurate view of the Route 1 corridor and this mix of modes of transportation that people experience in Route 1. A lot of our perspectives are from the traffic point of view because we drive up and down Route 1. We also want you to, if you haven't worn the hat of a pedestrian recently on Route 1, let's consider that angle, as well as a transit user, either one who depends on transit or would like to depend on transit. Some of the earlier conversations that I had with folks in the room where I wish I have a 3-mile commute to Fort Belvoir. I wish I had a better transit option. So in brief, Project Corridor, it's a 15-mile corridor that we're studying, a lot of different neighborhoods and different kinds of environments in this 15-mile corridor, from Woodbridge in the south all the way to Huntington in the north. There have been a lot of prior studies on this really important corridor, and the corridor writ large includes important facilities like I-95, including VRE, but the corridor that we're studying very specifically for this study is the Route 1 right-of-way, that 15 miles that I was describing. This is just a few of those prior studies. Are you hearing me in the back? Okay, I need to focus on this microphone. So there's also a lot of energy towards doing something. And we wanted to put this particular study, which is a year-long study, in a little bit of context for you on this timeline. So after this multimodal alternatives analysis, or at the culmination of this alternatives analysis, which is a year-long, very focused study, would be a recommendation for a multimodal alternative to be carried forward to the next step of project planning and development. That next step would include environmental documentation that's necessary from the state and federal funding perspective, as well as additional concept engineering design that lets decision makers and technical people feel like the funding plan can have more security or a smaller margin for error. And then after that, there are subsequent phases of design and then a construction of an improvement from the transportation perspective. So there are lots of steps. This is a very important decision-making step that we're in right now. Just to summarize some of what Tim said, we're looking at 3 categories of transportation. We're looking at bicycle and pedestrian transportation. We're looking at public transportation, transit, and we're also looking at highway travel, vehicular travel. And we're blending those, we're putting them together along this corridor for a multimodal recommendation. Now, Meredith and I are going to go back and forth a little bit because there's some pieces that she's really focused on, the public involvement part. Then thanks to everybody for coming out, and the land use, which is a vital part as well.
Well, quickly, we'd like to go over with you some of the things that we've learned from you from our outreach efforts to date. One of those being the survey that we distributed. We had about 60 people that replied to the survey that we distributed at the first public meeting and online, and we appreciate all of you who took the time to fill that out. Some of the things that we learned in that survey is that the most important transportation needs on Route 1 are public transit and improved traffic flow. So those are both important to people. So we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. The most important improvements for encouraging walking on Route 1 are more sidewalks and more destinations within walking distance, as well as more marked crosswalks. So you'll see that these are some of the factors that we're looking at in the land use element. And the most important improvements for encouraging biking are bike paths separated from car traffic, which was rated #1, which you'll see in some of the concepts coming up here. #2 was bike lanes also on Route 1. And finally, more destinations in my neighborhood. So these are all factors, things that you all would like to see improved as part of this project. What we learned from you in public meeting #1, some of the key themes were creating destinations, that this isn't just a throughway, Route 1, although sometimes it feels like that's what it is. Understanding how the Route 1 transit service connects within the region, that it's not an isolated corridor. Ensuring that Fort Belvoir is a key participant, and Fort Belvoir has been participating extensively on this project. Creating safe pedestrian and bicycle connections and ADA compliance, and then factoring in stream protection and other environmental quality. So those are some of the key factors that we have been incorporating as we move forward. We've been doing a lot of outreach in a lot of different ways, and it's great to see that so many of you heard about this project. We've been having committee meetings with a technical group, elected officials, and a community group, public meetings like this. We've been on social media. We've had newspaper articles and press releases. We've been out at the metro stations and the bus stops trying to collect information, community events, online. We've tried to do some targeted outreach to make sure that we reach all the diverse populations on the corridor. Back to Jason for now.
So, why are we here today? First, we really want to explain where we've been over the last few months. Many of you were here a few months ago. We talked about the study initiation, what the goals and objectives of the study. We want to report out to you what we've learned, what the next steps are. And we need your feedback. We need your feedback on the alternatives for evaluation, and we also need your feedback on how to evaluate. What are the most important factors that you'd like us to look at on the technical side? Our job as executors of this study is interesting and tough because we're blending a lot of technical elements and we're bringing in your comments to inform that process. And so that's why we do need your comments, and we're doing our best to attach those in the technical evaluation and in the study. So Tim mentioned that you received a couple of handouts. These evaluation factors, this slide summarizes some of the evaluation factors, and you have a handout with those. There's also a display board in the back that we invite you to put your dot on or circle the factors that to you are most important as we evaluate transportation in this corridor. We're looking at the range of things. We're looking at both the very nitty-gritty things around transportation, traffic, levels of service. We're looking at how well does transit do in terms of its travel time, in terms of the riders that it carries. But we're also looking at things that are on the land use side and on the financial side. How feasible are these alternatives to actually implement? And what is the supportive land use around the alternatives? a bit more on process. So step one is take all of the potential alternatives for transportation in the corridor, boil that down, screen it down to the ones that are the most reasonable, the ones that are most appropriate for this corridor. And that's what we've done over the last few months. We've boiled that down into the most appropriate alternatives. We're going to talk about that more. And then this step two is make a recommendation based on a detailed evaluation of those most appropriate alternatives. So first of all, we're going to show you what we looked at in terms of the range of alternatives for vehicular travel. This is narrowly focused on how does Route 1 carry automobile traffic. And so we looked at different cross-section configurations. We looked at the existing configuration of Route 1, which does vary, by the way. I experienced that tonight. I had to merge. I was in the third lane. I had to merge to the second lane. There are many places where you go from 2 to 3 lanes. We looked at expanding Route 1, one lane everywhere. And so that we looked at this 4 lanes in either direction cross-section. We looked at converting a lane, so dedicating one of the 3 lanes or one of the 2 lanes to transit only. And we also looked at a consistent lanes option, which would have 3 lanes in either direction for the entire corridor. We looked at the traffic impacts. We looked at, in general, oops, I'm going the wrong direction. We looked at right-of-way impacts, and the best alternative from the highway perspective for balancing those traffic and right-of-way considerations was the consistent lanes alternative, which would have 3 travel lanes in either direction. We did a lot of coordination with the good engineers at VDOT to vet all of our assumptions on traffic growth, etc. And so this 3 lanes in either direction for general traffic is what we'll move forward with and combine that with the other modes. The next mode that we looked at is bicycle and pedestrian travel. I talked with a gentleman earlier who came here by bike and had to put his bike over a fence to get to the meeting. I was very admiring of that. The bicycle and pedestrian element is really important because it's this kind of connectivity. Not all of us are going to be able to do that feat of moving our bike over a fence to make a short trip between our destination and our home, or our work and the convenience store. So this bike ped element is really important for connectivity. We looked at different cross sections. We looked at, as Meredith mentioned, whether bicycle traffic is in the Route 1 lanes or whether it's outside of that. We heard and our analysis supported having the bicycle traffic outside of the pavement of Route 1, and we looked at pedestrian accessibility, that providing pedestrian accessibility up and down the corridor is of a lot of importance. And again, we had to balance factors. We had to balance the cost and impacts of expanding the width of Route 1 against the benefit of providing that consistent accessibility. And the recommendation is that there's a combined multi-use path for the length of Route 1. And this caveat here, this note, is that there are many places along the corridor where there will be enough room to have both a bike lane and a separate sidewalk facility, but due to the assumed speeds along Route 1 and the availability of land and space, this is the general recommendation that we're going to apply moving forward. Now for transit. The transit element of the analysis had several steps, and we want to show you those steps. First, we looked at the broad range of alternatives, from local bus all the way to different rail technologies, different bus applications, and the most promising are these 4 transit alternatives. Enhanced bus, which is somewhat like the existing REX service, so it has enhanced stations. It has a branding that lets you identify that bus. It has pretty frequent service. We looked at bus rapid transit, which is the next step in a bus system, which has dedicated lanes along the corridor, so it lets the bus service move quickly. It has stations that are more robust for passenger convenience and comfort, and it often has elements that let it move through traffic more quickly, move through traffic signals. And light rail transit is assumed in this corridor to be at the surface, so it would operate much like the bus rapid transit alternative would operate, and again with robust stations and its own dedicated lanes. And then we looked at a metro rail alternative throughout the whole corridor. And these four alternatives, and I should say about the metro rail alternative, the assumption that we made for this initial analysis was that it would be underground for the northern segment to Hybla Valley, and then it would be grade separated or aerial for the rest of the route for this initial look. Now we took those initial alternatives and we looked at a range of evaluation factors. Specifically, we looked at ridership, we looked at costs, and we looked at land use. We'll talk about these features. Those major features led us to refine those alternatives, and we're going to explain what the refinements were, but we generally have the same list of four alternatives with an important exception that enhanced bus alternative, the levels of ridership and the level of additional investment let us say, the corridor at least can accommodate some kind of bus rapid transit service. So we had two bus rapid transit alternatives. We kept the light rail alternative, and we looked at metro rail and observed that for the very high cost of metro rail, given the ridership that we saw, it would make the most sense if we were going to continue to evaluate metro rail to assume a shorter segment in the northern end that would be coupled with bus rapid transit to the south. We're going to just walk through those alternatives so you get a little bit better sense of what they might look like, how they would be configured. This is that first bus rapid transit alternative. Assumes curb running, dedicated lanes for transit, and all the way through Fort Belvoir. And this alternative assumes that south of Fort Belvoir, all the way to Woodbridge, that those buses would run in mixed traffic with other traffic. This is a little rendering or view of how that would look to the south. The second alternative, bus rapid transit, running in median lanes, just a different configuration. This assumes the median lanes would extend all the way to Prince William County. This third alternative is the light rail transit alternative. Just shows this graphic shows how that could look running in the median of Route 1. And we took this place as kind of a generic imagined place along Route 1 in the future as development would occur. The fourth alternative, which is this hybrid metro rail and bus rapid transit alternative, this graphic shows that in the north end, we assume that this portion between Huntington and Hybla Valley could be an underground metro rail investment with stations as shown, Huntington, Beacon Hill, Hybla Valley, and then to the south, bus rapid transit in the median lanes, or get a transfer place station at Hybla Valley. So we looked at those alternatives. Here are the measures, the key measures that we started looking at, just to give you a sense of how those alternatives compare to one another. I know it's hard to see the numbers at the back. There are boards that have the same information with them as well. But as you expect, the bus alternatives are both the higher cost alternatives. The bus alternatives attract more ridership than doing nothing for certain. There's a strong ridership that they would carry. The metro rail and light rail alternatives carry more ridership because of their features, because of the attraction of people to a rail investment, and because of the speed that those alternatives have. And those rail alternatives have a corresponding higher cost. This cost per rider number was one that we looked pretty closely at, and it's a good sort of benchmark number that you can use to compare across the alternatives. And we can have a more detailed conversation about cost per rider as different folks are interested in after we separate back to open house mode. So how are we going to evaluate these alternatives? This is now the critical phase of the process where we're going to look at these four alternatives and look at even more defined features of those and evaluate them. So again, we're looking to you to help us with that. We're looking to you to understand where your priorities may lie in terms of how we evaluate. We're looking at ridership. We're looking at a convenient service that moves quickly. We're looking at impacts to right-of-way or other resources along the corridor. Do you care most about cost and the ability to implement something? We're also looking at the Federal Transit Administration criteria for evaluating projects. One of the major sources for capital funding for transit is the New Starts program, and the New Starts program has a very organized way of comparing projects. These are the factors that the New Starts program looks at, and they balance these technical factors. There are 6 of them that are equally weighted. They balance those against the financial readiness of the project sponsor to implement a project. So we're going to turn our attention to land use for a moment.
Thank you. One of the key concepts that we're trying to capture as part of this study is the relationship between population and employment growth and how that impacts transportation demand for all modes, vehicular, bicycle and pedestrian, and transit, how it also impacts tax base, and then how that tax base can be fed back into construction of transit, operation of transit, but also investment in the public realm and creating a place where people want to be and want to live and work. So creating that high quality community development. I'm going to show you three examples that show that close relationship between high quality transit investments and strong land use patterns. And what we mean by strong land use patterns are higher density developments, a mixture of uses, so origins, people living in a place where they can access the transit, and then as well the transit taking them somewhere where they can get to a job or to services, as well as creating a place where people can walk, and they can walk to access these services, they can walk to access transit. One of these places is Cleveland, Ohio. This is associated with a bus rapid transit service, so it's bus and dedicated lands, and it has all these factors. It has a higher concentration of development, it has places that are comfortable for people to walk, and it has a higher tax base as a result of this higher population and employment that then could feed back into supporting that transit service and supporting a high quality community environment. The second example is Charlotte, North Carolina, where they have a light rail. And light rail is generally associated with an even higher level of population and employment, an even higher concentration of development. But as with the Cleveland example, one of its keys to success is a mixture of uses. People live near transit, they work near transit, there's services near the transit station, but also people can walk to access that transit service. And you can see that high quality pedestrian environment that exists in this location. And then our third example is Arlington, Virginia, which all of you know, and this is associated with Metrorail. And Metrorail, again, has a slightly even higher association, a slightly higher population and employment densities associated with it than even the light rail and the bus rapid transit. So you can see these, as the quality of the mode increases, as does the population and employment densities. But the factors that you see here are consistent with the other two. You have a high quality pedestrian environment, you have a mix of uses, so people can walk from their home to transit, they can walk to shops, they can get off of transit and get to their jobs. And that's how we understand that relationship between transit and land use. And that's what we're trying to apply in our analysis here for this corridor. Our approach to the land use analysis for this study has 3 components, and I'm going to give you a broad overview here, and then at the boards we can talk with you in more detail about how we've applied these scenarios. But basically we've tried to understand what is this relation, what kind of land uses do we need to have on this corridor in order to support different modes and help us make that decision about what the most appropriate transit service is for this corridor. Our first scenario looks at what's already projected for the corridor in 2035. We're looking at the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments statistics on what's already expected to happen by 2035. And we've analyzed what kind of transit modes might be associated with that. We found that the kinds of modes are probably more like express bus, which is like the rec service that exists on the corridor right now. So we then asked ourselves the question, well, what kind of increment of growth might we see? What additional development might we see if transit was put on this corridor? We know from nationwide examples that when transit is implemented in a location, you often will see an increase in population employment along that corridor. So we took that information and we applied it, working with representatives from Fairfax and Prince William County to determine what an appropriate increase would be. And we applied it to the corridor. And we learned that, as you all might expect, higher levels of development would be expected in the northern part of the corridor, up near Beacon Hill, Pendoff, Huntington Metro Station. And they could potentially support a BRT or LRT type investment. But further south on the corridor, even with that bump, we see land uses that would be more associated with an express bus type service. The exception being down in Woodbridge, where again we see a higher concentration of development. We know there's a lot of interest in Metro Rail from people, so the third question we asked is, well, what level of development would we need to get in order to support a Metro Rail service? And that's our third scenario. So I'm going to show you a few examples here so you can see how these play out. Shows here, this white is the half-mile radius around a proposed station at Beacon Hill, and this area where you see the colored boxes, that's within the shopping center area that exists today, and it shows redevelopment, and the heights of the buildings, that's what these numbers are, the heights of buildings that you might expect given 2035 projections. And this is another angle. We then, with that scenario 2, the 25% increment of growth that we often see associated with a transit investment and associated change in county policies to promote development, that's when we see an increase in Beacon Hill from the blue, which is the 2035, and the red is the additional development associated with scenario 2.
Are those numbers the number of stories?
Yes, they're the number of stories. Good question. We then compare that to the comprehensive plan, what's already shown. Many of you may have worked on that or be familiar with what's in the Fairfax County Comprehensive Plan for long-term expectations for the Beacon Hill area. And so this is the additional development, the aqua, above the scenario 2. And then thirdly, we asked ourselves that question, well, what would it take to get Metro Rail on this corridor? And then you can see it is a dramatic increase of the kind of population and employment densities that would be needed, and that's similar to the kind of densities that you see at, for example, Ballston Station. So it's consistent with what we already see in the region. A way to understand this a little bit better, sometimes the boxes are a little bit hard to understand. We've tried to do an illustrative of how the area could potentially change. So this is the Beacon Hill Shopping Center that you're all familiar with right here in Route 1. And we've created this illustrative that shows what that scenario 2 might look like. We tried to, this is not an approved plan or anything, it's just a conceptual idea of what it might look like and feel like, and the kind of street environment that might be created, again, to create a pedestrian-oriented environment where people could walk to transit, access services, get home and to work. And if you have any more interest in the details of the land use analysis, we have boards in the back, and I'd be glad to speak with you.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of the presentation, and then we'll have a question and answer period in just a moment. So this very important and interesting question of how do communities implement these transportation improvements? How do they pay for them? So we're looking at several examples. And we wanted to show you some examples that are specific to the transit side or the public transportation side. This little scale just shows you some of the examples that we looked at and where the project alternatives that we're studying fall into that mix. You can see here at the top of this, the phase 1 of the Silver Line extension at almost $3 billion. The Purple Line that many of us are following in the news, that's at $2.5 billion. Then the project alternatives that we're looking at here for the 15 miles of Route 1. And then we're also looking at
Got an hour.
At the bottom of this list are the Norfolk Tide project is a light rail project that's $316 million, and then the Broad Street BRT project, which is under study and implementation in Richmond, $50 million. So one of the things that we learn about these projects is that they don't depend on any one funding source. They're complicated. The people who implement them are creative at putting together a range of funding. So we'll just talk about those in brief right now. The Purple Line project relied on about a third of its capital, is relying about a third of its capital from the federal New Starts program that we talked about. A big portion from the state. They're part of a federal loan program that's going to be repaid through that state fund. There is some private equity in that Purple Line project to come at that total cost of $2.5 billion. The Silver Line project, a lot of different funds, as you know, going into that project. A fairly large federal grant, but that federal grant is only 16% of the overall cost. They are depending, the biggest share here is the revenue from the Dulles Toll Road. So there's a revenue source for that project, as well as a lot of local funding here. The Broad Street project in Richmond, again, looking to about a 50% federal grant, and then state and local funds to make up the rest. And the recently implemented Tide project in Norfolk is, again, a combination. Federal funding to make up the more than 50% of that project, and then a significant portion of state and local funds. So again, the message is, as we look toward implementation and funding, it's going to be a mix, and more the federal government is looking to the localities and the region to take the first step, and then the federal government would match with some of these capital grants, but they're really looking to the local commitment before they then make their commitment. That's a change from what we've seen historically on some of these transportation projects. They're getting more and more competitive. So what are the next steps? Let's step back for a second and look at the sort of big picture on process. So we're going to be looking at those 4 alternatives that are multimodal in nature. We're going to be looking at making a recommendation, and the next time we meet in the June timeframe, we'll come back to you with this technical recommendation of which multimodal project or alternative is the best for implementation, and we'll look at how that can be implemented through the environmental documentation, concept design, and those next steps. So, and we'll be considering, importantly, both the shorter term and the longer term future of Route 1 as we think about how to make that recommendation for the improvements. And I think the rest of these points speak for themselves, but we're also not losing sight of how Route 1 fits into the larger region and its transportation plans. And again, to underscore how does the project get funded, we'll be coming back with some interesting information on the economics of the corridor, the value, and how that value can translate into funding for transportation investments.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to acknowledge Senator Eben as well, who came in after the initial announcement. So thank you, Senator Eben, for your support and for coming out tonight. So with that, I think we're into Q&A. So if anyone has a question, then we'll just kind of go with hands. And I think, yes, in the blue shirt, you were first. Yeah, go ahead. I'll repeat the question as well.
I want to thank you very much. It seems to be a beautiful project. But so far, I'm the #1 person who take about most of the time. So I've been living here a little more than 25 years. I live in Bellevue, sir. So referring to Route 1, which I'm very happy to hear that, but I want to let you know, so far by visualizing, I have friends who drive, I don't drive. But you know, you're building too many houses. You're talking about, you have to evaluate that in order to make the transit a little bit, slow, not the amount of accidents you have over here with the buses, number 9 so far, or wrecks or whatever. But what it is too many houses are being built. You have Fort Belvoir. You said a minute ago, I don't think Fort Belvoir is participating too much on this project. But I do believe you should keep in mind about building too many houses around.
Okay.
If you want to make it a little bit, the transit to be a little bit more slow, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
This is what I see.
Okay.
Visualize.
So just I guess a comment generally about the amount of development. Appreciate the comment. Obviously, the type of development you get is very important to how the transit does. So thank you for the comment. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have 2 points I'd like to make. The first has to do with the Woodlawn Stables, year 2016.
Can you give her the microphone?
I'll repeat the
Where
question.
their lease will not be renewed, and therefore there will be a lot of new housing built, I would think, in the area where Woodlawn Stables is, which is going to, I wonder if that was included in the
In the
travel
land.
analysis.
Okay.
And also, there is the new road connecting Telegraph Road with Route 1, I believe it's Mulligan Road.
Okay.
That's going to also bring in a lot more traffic.
Okay, so the question was about the Woodlawn Stables housing construction on the side of the Woodlawn Stables, also Mulligan Road connection, and I think it's probably a question for either Meredith or Jeff Rue, a member of.
So it's actually in the historic district, so there will be an easement. So actually in that particular area, there won't be an intense amount of land use development in that particular area. And actually Fort Belvoir has been actively engaged with this project. Chris Landgraf, which I failed to recognize him earlier, I apologize, with Fort Belvoir. But he has been, engaged in this, and we met with them actually very first thing to understand because they're having construction right now. There's some activity that's going on, so we're keeping that coordination close. Yes, sir.
The corridor has pretty much suffered since I've lived here for 43 years. And to see more of the same that you seem to be promoting with bus rapid transit. We have the highest bus ridership here. But we also look at a number of different factors, and the economic development that we really need is contingent on really putting a first-rate system in. Every metro stop on this system is an economic boomtown, even in Southeast. And to just do a stopgap measure, and also accommodating the commuters from the south, the visitors, 1 million to Mount Vernon, 500,000 to the Army Museum of the Future, 500,000 to the hospital up here, and a lot of other development that would take place only if Metro Rail were built. To put the density that you did on that one small thing, I think that was the whole corridor, 30 million square feet of office space on Beacon Hill wasn't really fair to look
Look
at.
at Highland Valley. Look at Highland Valley. It's got plenty of area that still needs to be developed. All kinds of shopping centers that can be converted. And I tell you what, I agree with them 100%. Sitting here and talking about improved bus services is ridiculous.
Good.
It blocks traffic.
Well, actually, that was actually an example. We appreciate that comment. That was an example, an illustration of the kind of development that would be required. So we didn't have the time to go through each.
Can I add one thing?
Each station, and we are actually looking at all the alternatives equally. So we're not just looking at improved bus service. So we are looking at the bus rapid transit, we're looking at light rail, and we're also looking at metro. Now, we are looking at a hybrid as well, as you noted, so we'll look at what would be feasible for a metro extension, and then a bus rapid transit premium type of service beyond that.
Please keep those figures that I said about the tourists. You know,
Perfect.
you have no tourists, you have no real development outside of this one area just to support one metro station.
Right.
To take the whole corridor into consideration, there are a lot of people that come from down south, and this is the road to work, and that's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
It's a gas station and the road to work.
Yes, sir.
And that's what we're trying to change.
Yep. Thank you, we appreciate that. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question, when you're done with the next phase of the study, what is the time frame that this process is gonna take? Because everyone here is experiencing, real time, right now, traffic issues and transportation issues. So how long is this full process going to take? And then how long will it take to start implementing? You have to find the funding, are we looking at nothing will change for 5 years?
So the schedule right now.
No, I mean, that's just.
Yeah, and these are, these type of major capital projects, they do take a long time to develop and implement. What we're doing right now, this will help the locals to make their decision. So we'll make a recommendation, and the locals will be able to advance that recommendation. And the next step would be taking it into the environmental analysis, as well as the preliminary engineering and design. And we would continue to do the land use studies. We continue to work with Fairfax County, Prince William County on what it's gonna take from the land use perspective. And then we'll work depending on the avenue of funding. So if this takes the new starts, which Jason mentioned earlier, that is a pretty rigorous process to go through, and that does take quite a few years to be successful. It is a very competitive program. So it is very, very, depending on the alternative, it could take some time.
So, and I have to just follow up with another question that's totally understandable. I think everyone in this room understands that, major transportation change to a corridor like this is going to take a long time. But in the short term, do we have any solutions for, what we are now experiencing on this corridor at 5 o'clock on a Saturday night?
Yes, ma'am, and we will want to make some recommendations, near-term recommendations on what can be improved. And remember, it isn't just the transit alternative, there's also the road alternative that's in play here as well as the bicycle and pedestrian recommendations. So we'll be working with VDOT and of course Fairfax County and Prince William County to advance those recommendations as well.
Thank you.
And in the back, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think the question was how many stops?
Yeah, so she was asking about the metro alternative that was shown. So initially, we looked at 15 mile all the way to Woodbridge. That wasn't feasible from the standpoint of cost. So the one that's under study is 3 stops from Huntington to Beacon Hill to High Blue Valley. Jason's bringing it up right now. So that's the segment right now that's under study that looks like it could be feasible. Yeah, sorry, Huntington, Beacon Hill, High Blue Valley. Yeah, so 2 stops south of Huntington. Yep.
Not that.
Yeah. Yes, sir, in the blue shirt.
Couple of comments. One, shared use paths are a very bad idea to mix bicycles and pedestrians if there's any significant pedestrian traffic at all. That's one. Also, I noticed that you're already starting to install this path in little pieces down there by the new Costco, the new Walmart, and on either side of Boswell Avenue. They have little pieces of the shared use path are already installed. The other thing that I wanted to say is that to get off the mark, you could start with bicycle and pedestrian improvements because they are chump change compared to all of this. cost of one bus, you could materially improve pedestrian and bicycle traffic all up and down the corridor.
Okay, so it was a question about the shared use path, and then also about preference for sort of low cost bike and pedestrian improvements. So I'm going to hand the mic to Leonard Wolfenstein from Fairfax County.
Yes, again, I'm with Fairfax County Department of Transportation. I just wanted to address your point about some of the short-term pedestrian other improvements, because we've been going for a number of years on particularly sidewalk improvements and crosswalk improvements to address, especially for everybody and especially transit users who are always pedestrians before and after their trip. And there are a lot of projects we've done. A lot of projects have been in the planning phase for several years, and there are a number that have been implemented, and there are quite a number that are like right on the edge that should be built like this year. So I just want to say that we are trying to address those short-term, a lot of those short-term pedestrian improvements, and not waiting for this long-term vision to come into place to address those.
Okay, I want to see you pave all the goat trails.
That's exactly some of the things we're trying to do now.
Okay, yes, ma'am, in the green.
I just wondered, in the short term, has any consideration been given to making pull-offs for buses, stops? Because I think that is one of the major problems on the road, on weekends, because if you're in the white lane, there's no way in town you're ever going to move.
So she was asking about bus turnouts and pullouts for bus. So part of the analysis, one of the alternatives is a curbside bus rapid transit, and Jason's firm actually is doing a pro and con analysis of whether it makes more sense for the buses to operate in the right lane or in the median lane. So it is being looked at. The level of specific bus stops, that's really more of an operational issue that gets down to Metro Bus and the Fairfax Connector and the county. And this study isn't really looking at the level of individual bus stops, but we are looking at a curbside operation as opposed to a median operation. So, yes, sir.
I just want to respond to some of the comments about buses that haven't been as supportive. Buses, if they have pullouts, they have to pull back in, and many of these buses have 50, 60 people at a time that have to wait for traffic, and we need a perhaps more aggressive signal priority so that the buses can pull back into traffic so that 50 people aren't waiting when they can't get back in the lane. The buses move a lot of people per hour, hundreds.
Yes, so for those of you that didn't hear, just a comment about the importance of buses being able to move in and out of traffic and the amount of people that buses carry. So I think both of the points that you hit on are important elements of express bus and bus rapid transit, and they are, things like signal priority, things like dedicated lanes do help make the transit more attractive and do help, So, yes, ma'am, in the very back. Yeah. Yeah, so she was asking about opportunities to comment, which let's help me remind everyone, there's a board back there that has the goals and objectives. Go back there tonight and support, which of the goals and objectives you think are important. There's a written survey that we'll take that, after the meeting. We'll also take it during the meeting, and Meredith is also reminding me that, yes, the survey's online. It'll stay up, it'll stay up for a long amount of time after the meeting. So yeah, people will have the opportunity to go online. It's a good opportunity to comment. Don, I mean, so she's asking about the vehicle or the auto alternative, I guess you'd call it. So yeah, what the cross section that you saw, the 3 through lanes, that's a recommendation of the study. That's consistent with the Fairfax County plan. That's consistent with VDOT's long-term goals. So yeah, the 3 through lanes, the consistent 3 through lanes, that is a recommendation at this point. Yes. So let's go over here in the blue shirt, sir.
Yeah, Arlington County is currently rolling out 2 different streetcar plans with 2 different funding mechanisms. So obviously, Columbia Pike, they're going through a formal state process to try to get money, and then in Crystal City, they've got a lot of landowners on board to actually absorb some of the cost along with that plan. I would hope and expect that you would be pursuing all different funding options, including involving some of the landowners and shouldering some of those burdens, considering they will benefit significantly. As a landowner myself, I would expect that if my property value is going to significantly increase, that me paying a little bit towards that will be returned tenfold.
So a comment about the Arlington streetcar projects, and a comment that we should be looking at all the alternatives, including local funding, including business funding. So I don't know.
All taxpayer. All taxpayers.
All okay. So
a follow-on to that, the last 4 or 5 times that I've been to the polls, Fairfax County has asked me to raise a bill or so in taxes for property to expand or build a new library. I've been to 10 of the libraries in this county, and most of them are very much underutilized. Why can't we put something on the ballot that would put a mill against for this project? Once we get, obviously, at that point, we realize what the funding is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So to answer your question, I mean, so local general fund, local property tax is a revenue source that's under consideration. But at this level, we really can't be specific about certain revenue sources. I think at this level, I think it's also premature to be talking about. Sure. So appreciate the comment. Yes, sir. In the play.
Yeah, it seems you talked about 6 lanes end-to-end of traffic, but it looks like if you put either bus rapid transit or light rail down the middle, you're really talking about an 8-lane throughway, plus maybe some stuff for bike paths on the side. So you're talking about a rather wider thing than you've got now, which doesn't help pedestrians get across the street yet. And one of the advantages of the metro rail is that if it's underground, you don't have to have a wider throughway.
So he's asking about the 6-lane recommendation, and you're correct that that the transit, whether it's median or curb, would be in addition to the 6 lanes. The sort of specific intersection operations, where you'd have crosswalks and where you'd have right turn lanes and left turn lanes and things like that. That's really the level of engineering and design that'd be required to do that is sort of beyond where we are at this point in the study. But I think that's an important point about sort of maintaining the walkability of the corridor, and I think that
I'm talking stopping. It takes 35, 40 minutes to get over to Springfield, which is a 10-minute drive. Anytime into 3 o'clock. So I'm not going to live with that for 30 years now while this is going on. Or is anything happening in Belvoir to relieve that 2-lane log jam?
No, Fort Belvoir is starting and will be kicking off the Route 1 widening from Mount Vernon Memorial Highway to Telegraph Road on the other end by Pohick Church. We'll be doing that 3.5 miles starting in June. Well, April we do some of the initial work, but June is the heavy lifting starts. And that project is scheduled to be finished currently. We're looking at March or April of 2016. So Mulligan Road, which is a 4-lane road system that connects Route 1 to Telegraph again, will be opening in June of this year. So June of 2014, Mulligan Road will connect Route 1 to Telegraph Road again. April or May, potentially, of 2016, the 3.5 miles that is part of this study will actually be widened and will include transit capability on that 3.5 miles from Mount Vernon Memorial Highway all the way to Telegraph Road.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Gail Parker, and I got here too late to get the survey. So I want to make the observation that More roads just means more traffic. We don't need more traffic. We need mass transit. We need rail along this line. And this area has been long neglected for a long time. And we believe that it's time for action now. There have been several studies, none of which were, in my opinion, were adequate. We need some action to build the rail and to get it moving now.
Thank you. And we do have surveys, so we'll make sure that you have one available. Yes, yes, sir.
One of the proposals that you showed there, putting the buses in the median. If you do that, how are the riders gonna get to that? They're gonna have to cross all those traffic.
Yes, sir. So there would be a median station, so we would need to make sure that we had the pedestrian connectivity there that would allow for safe crossings and safe access to that station. And that is the hallmark of any transit service and any implementing this kind of a system, is you do improve the bicycle and the pedestrian facilities. And in and around these areas, the land use would likely change. It would become more pedestrian oriented, so that will help as well to ensure the safety of the riders. And I do want to mention that Delegate Sickles was able to make it, so thank you, Delegate Sickles. We want to recognize that you were able to be here this evening. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mary Queen. I have a question. That it seems like with the light rail, you could, if you were going to Belvoir, you could take the light rail down and then transfer at Woodbridge to a bus. Is that right? And go on down?
Yes, ma'am.
Or you could, if there was the metro, you could take the metro to Hybla Valley and then transfer to a bus.
Correct.
And is there any estimate, would one or the other be more time consuming, or more, would the flow go better with one or the other of those systems? Because if people are going to get off the road, it's going to have to be a smooth system, a smooth transit system for a long way.
So you're asking about the different modes, and in terms of how they would operate, and that's a pretty technical question, but from what I understand from Jason and the project teams, the light rail is coded at a slightly higher speed than the bus rapid transit, but the bus rapid transit is a higher speed than sort of local transit. One of the big advantages of the metro rail is that it does eliminate a transfer for people that are going further north into Washington D.C. and the Pentagon. So that's one of the reasons why the ridership means a lot of the Route 1 traffic is destined for Washington D.C. and points north of Alexandria. But yeah, that's sort of probably about as much as I know without getting into sort of technical detail. So.
But those will be things that we explore further as the locally preferred alternative advances. Those will certainly be things that we'll want to examine. Yes, ma'am. We can take one in the back, the very back, sir in the blue, who hasn't answered.
Not an insignificant amount of traffic. These are one corridor towards the Tysons area. Do any of these options provide timing for that to allow through one corridor to be less of a cut through and keep more direct connection to the kind of invested Tysons?
Sorry, so you're asking about a connection to Tyson's corner?
I believe I saw a number recently said roughly 35% of traffic in the Route 1 corridor heads northwest towards Tysons area. Say this, discuss that, take that into consideration, tie-ins.
Yeah, well, so there wouldn't be a direct connection. I believe the Fairfax County plan does sort of in the long term talk about connections between Route 1 and Tyson's area. But for this particular study, it shows up in the ridership patterns. And anyone that would be making that trip would go through Huntington and sort of make their way out to Tyson's Corner, using the Metro Rail system, yellow line to orange line to silver line, right?
I'm sorry, are you suggesting someone's going to go from Huntington onto crippled blue line to transfer to the silver line down to Tysons?
Well, I'm saying for what we're looking at for Route 1, we didn't look at a direct connection. It was sort of beyond the scope of the Route 1 study. So what I'm saying is it shows up sort of indirectly in the ridership patterns. So I think probably have time for maybe one or two more, and then we did want to leave time for people to view the board. So, sir, in the brown jacket. Yeah. Yes.
Question about the Route 1 split with 95 south of Belleville. What's in the plans for that? Because that is a major problem on Route 1. A major problem.
So you mean where Route 1
splits is one lane.
Okay.
It's one lane. That is a major problem bottleneck in this area.
That's on the extension.
That would take a lot of pressure off traffic right there. But you got the railroad involved there.
Okay.
Yeah, sir, I'm Bud Sigmund with the Virginia Department of Transportation. I know we've got a project there. I don't have the specific details. A different group is working that. Come and see me afterwards, and I'll give you my card. I can get you that information. I don't want to give you misinformation.
Yeah. Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Bud. So yes, sir, in the gray shirt.
Quick question for you. If you were to bring Metro Rail down to Hyper Valley or Beacon Mall, would you also take into account putting parking garages so people coming out of Woodbridge or Stafford wouldn't start parking in neighborhoods taking up local streets?
Yeah, so the question was about parking garages, and the study team did look at 2 parking garages. What the locations they identified were Woodbridge, and the second one is escaping me, but it's south of Fort Belvoir. But there are parking rides, yes, coded into all of the alternatives. Yeah.
But none of the
Lord.
proposed extended Metro Rail stops, right? No parking at Hedla Valley, no parking. Oh, there are?
Yeah, you have it.
Well, I think that was his question.
Yes, there would be parking, and we would continue to assess the needs for the level of parking at each of the stations. I mean, right now, we are assuming some park and ride, but as we advance, then of course that will get refined. Yes, ma'am, in the back, who haven't asked questions?
I'm at the Mount Vernon Council, and our Transportation Committee chair is here. A couple of our co-chairs are here. One of the things that we all need to think about and remember is this doesn't get done by itself. The connectivity between transportation and land use planning, working with the county planning and zoning people, is going to be critical to making this happen. With respect to this gentleman's comment about having parking lots, parking garages, when these community business centers where they're thinking about putting the Metro Rail, if that's what we get, happens, it's not just going to be plop a Metro Rail in the middle of what you currently see of low-rise retail businesses. What you're going to have is a mixed-use, enhanced development. There will be parking garages because it's not only going to accommodate the ridership on the transportation, it's going to accommodate the people that live and work there. So a little pitch for the Mount Vernon Council. If your community is not a member, please join. We've been around since 1967. We have a good reputation for getting things done. And see that guy right there with the glasses on his head. Yeah, we have a meeting at 8 o'clock tonight to talk about this very thing. Thank you.
And we do appreciate everyone's participation this evening, and you all have a voice, and we hope that this evening you'll be able to, either provide your input through the survey or through the dot exercise that we have in the back of the room. And we always can take comments on our website.